Seriayo, Eya Santa Oma for Brandless Sassini, Eya Bonding in Mayan, Mojana Nanum Shebunya to Mayan. Little Mini Wososo, say a bay and Piazzo, Interchasu, Koto, Canina, Casabi, Omina. Edi Abramuta Mayan Sassuota Tumse Omano Saviayo Omano Sariayo Eya Seta Ose Oma for Branetre Omano Saviayo Omano Sariayo Eya Seta Ose Oma for Branetre Sassini Sassuota Tumse Omano Saviayo Omano Sariayo Eya Seta Ose Oma for Branetre Omano Saviayo Omano Sariayo Eya Seta Ose Oma for Branetre Sassini Eya Bonding in Mayan Mojana Nanum Shebunya to Mayan. Little Mini Wososo, say a bay and Piazzo, Interchasu, Koto, Canina, Casabi, Omina, Edi Abramuta Mayan Sassuota Tumse, Omano Saviayo, Omano Sariayo, Eya Seta Ose. Oma for Branetre, Omano Saviayo, Omano Sariayo, Eya Santa Ose, Oma for Branetre, Sassini, Eya Bonding in Mayan, Mojana Nanum Shebunya to Mayan. Little Mini Wososo, say a bay and Piazzo. Interchasu Koto Canina Casabi Omina Edi Abramuta Mayan Sassuota Tumse Omano Saviayo Omano Sariayo Eya Seta Ose Oma for Branetre Omano Saviayo Omano Sariayo Eya Seta Ose Oma for Branetre Sassini Eya Bonding in Mayan Mojana Nanum Shebunya to Mayan. Little Mini Wososo, say a bay and Piazzo, Interchasu, Koto, Canina, Casabi, Omina, Edi Abramuta Mayan Sassuota Tumse Saviayo, Omano Sariayo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Branetre, Omano Saviayo, Omano Sariayo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Branetre, Sassini, Eya Bonding in Mayan, Mojana Nanum Shebunya to Mayan. Little Mini Wososo, say a bay and Piazzo, Interchasu Koto Canina Casabi Omina, Edi Abramuta Mayan Sassuota Tumse, Omano Saviayo, Omano Sariayo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Branetre, Omano Saviayo, Omano Sariayo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Branetre Sassini, Eya Bonding in Mayan tomaye. Litumini wososo, sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Edia bramutamaye nasasu otatumse. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Sasini, eyabodini maye. Mojanana nanumshe bunyani tomaye. Litumini wososo, sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Edia bramutamaye nasasu otatumse. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Sasini, eyabodini maye. Mojanana nanumshe bunyani tomaye. Sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Edia bramutamaye nasasu otatumse. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Sasini, eyabodini maye. Mojanana nanumshe bunyani tomaye. Litumini wososo, sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Edia bramutamaye nasasu otatumse. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Sasini, eyabodini maye. Mojanana nanumshe bunyani tomaye. Litumini wososo, sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Edia bramutamaye nasasu otatumse. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Sasini, eyabodini maye. Mojanana nanumshe bunyani tomaye. Litumini wososo, sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Edia bramutamaye nasasu otatumse. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Omano sabayeyo, omano sariyeyo. Eyaseta ose, omafo granachwe. Sasini, eyabodini maye. Mojanana nanumshe bunyani tomaye. Litumini wososo, sayabaya biatwaso. Indojaso kotokani nyakasabi kuminya. Sayabaya Biaswasu, Interchasu, Kotsuka, Yakasabit, Omina, Edia, Ramutama, and Sasu, Tatumse, Omano Sabayo, Omano Sariayo, Ayasata, Ose, Omafo Granatre, Omano Sabayo, Omano Sariasasini.
Please, are we all set? Okay. Join news, are we set? We're set. Okay. Okay, it is 11 a.m. on the dot. We are 30 minutes behind time. We apologize for that, and so we will have to start now. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen of the press. You are welcome to the second edition of the NDC's weekly press briefing. As we indicated last week, this platform has been introduced to ensure that we have regular engagements on happenings in the country, regular engagements on the mismanagement of the affairs of this country by the AKUFO-ADDO government, which has led to a systematic decline of all sectors of our nation, and also regular engagements to put across our alternatives, superior policy alternatives, I should say, as far as the 2020 general elections is concerned. Today's edition will focus on two issues. First, I will be addressing you on what we've termed Corruption Tracker. We'll be launching a Corruption Tracker series today, and we'll be focusing on the Bosgate corruption scandal. Second, we will be responding to the false claims by no less a person than the President of the Republic of Ghana, His Excellency President AKUFO-ADDO, about the legacy, the infrastructural legacy of the NDC and John Dramani Mahama. But before we do so, let me acknowledge the radio stations and media networks who are carrying this press briefing live. In the Greater Accra region, we are being carried live. This presser is being carried live on GH1 television, Joy News Television, Power 97.9 FM, Class 91.3 FM, Accra 100.5 FM, Ahoto 92.3 FM, Green 88.5 FM, Green TV, Home Base TV, Radio 100.7 FM. In the Upper East region, we are being carried live on WED 88.3 FM, Zwarungu, Pure 92.1 FM, Navrongo, ZEBS 95.9 FM, Zebila, Source 100.1 FM, Boko. In the Northeast region, we are being carried live on LOM 94.7 FM, Bunkrubu, SCAP 101.3 FM, Nakpanduri. In Savannah, we are being carried live on Nkilgi 103.7 FM at Bole. In the Northern region, we are being carried live on Might 90.5 FM, Savulugu, ZAR Radio 99.3 FM at Tamale, Amana 96.3 FM at Tamale, Kesmi 107.1 FM at Tamale, Radio Tamale 91.7, Radio Kitawola 95.7 at Pandai, Suhupeli 103.3 FM at Tamale, Simili Radio 95.3 at Dalong, Justice 98.5 FM at Tamale, Diamond 93.7 FM at Tamale, In the Volta region, we are being carried live on Volta 1 TV, Ho, Sela Radio 97.1, Adabala, Global 105.1 FM, Ho, Swiss 93.7 FM, Ho, Lukusi Radio 96.1, at Golukwati, Dela Radio 105.7 at Adidome. In Ashanti region, we are being carried live on Kumasi 104.1 FM. Please, can we put our mobile phones on silent? Charity 99.9 FM, Duyankwanta. High Radio 103.1 at Bichim, are also carrying this presser live in the Ahafo region. In the Central region, we are being aired live on Coastal 94.9 FM, Mankensim, Benya 105.7 FM, Elmina, Live 107.5 FM, Cape Coast, Sweet 106.5 FM, Trifi Praso, Rich 98.7 FM, Asimfosu, Nice 90.7 FM, Winneba, Cape 93.3 FM, Cape Coast, and Obroma Nkoma 95.5 FM in Mankensim. As we proceed, I will be acknowledging other radio stations from other regions of the country who are streaming this press conference live. And so without wasting much time, I will commence with today's briefing with what I have already mentioned and described as our Corruption Tracker series, which we are launching today. I will do so in the next 10-15 minutes before our second speaker will come and deal with our second issue. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, corruption has undoubtedly been the bane of Ghana's development for a very long time, with the poor and vulnerable being at the worst end of this canker. As a responsible opposition with the responsibility of keeping government on its toes, the NDC is today embarking on a corruption tracker series to track the status of the countless cases of corruption we have witnessed under the AKUFO-ADDO government in the last 3.5 years. Scandals which have occasioned huge financial losses to the state and robbed Ghanaians of the development they were promised in the year 2016. The NDC is deeply worried about the fact that resources that otherwise should have gone into developmental projects in order to uplift the poor are sadly going to line the pockets of several greedy and selfish officials of the AKUFO-ADDO government through graft and sleaze. The Corruption Tracker series we are launching today is to help Ghanaians appreciate how the corrupt AKUFO-ADDO government is plundering the already constrained public purse of Ghana and the extent of damage this government has inflicted on all sectors of our nation. Through this initiative, we shall be taking the pains, one after the other, to do a total recall of the numerous corruption scandals in recent time and how President AKUFO-ADDO at all times has failed to protect the public purse. While at it, we shall also prove to the Ghanaian people that contrary to the self-acclaimed anti-corruption credentials, President AKUFO-ADDO is indeed the leader and chief patron of this notoriously corrupt administration. Now to the Bossgate corruption scandal, which is our focus for today. The Bossgate corruption scandal, as you may be aware of, happened in the year 2017, but has been conveniently swept under the carpet by President AKUFO-ADDO, who thinks that Ghanaians have a short memory. Now, friends from the media, what are the facts? On the 18th of January 2017, 5 million liters of fuel was contaminated at the premises of the Bulk Oil Storage and Transportation Company of Ghana, BOST, by the mixture of diesel and petrol, and sold to unlicensed businesses, Moving Pina Energy, Zoop Oil, under very dubious circumstances. At all times material to that transaction, Moving Pina Energy and Zoop Oil, who benefited from this transaction, had not been licensed by the National Petroleum Authority to trade in petroleum products in the downstream petroleum sector of Ghana. The sale of the contaminated fuel to these unlicensed businesses was therefore unlawful as it breached Section 11 and 32 of the NPA Act of 2005, Act 691. Again, the transaction did not go through any tender process in breach of Section 16, 40, 35, 83, and 84 of the Public Procurement Act of Ghana. Yet, in spite of these facts, which were known to President AKUFO-ADDO at the time, he mounted a robust defense for the then managing director of BOS, insisting that allegations of wrongdoing and corruption against him were false. And I'm sure you do recall when he mounted this defense. It was at the presidential media encounter in 2017. Ladies and gentlemen, this was after the BNI and NPA had attempted to cover up the scandal by rewarding the work of the committee that had been set up by the Minister for Energy at the time, Honorable Boakye Jakom. Today, we know that a committee tasked to investigate the Muvimpina Zoop oil contaminated fuel saga has found that the transaction was criminal and that the proceeds from same has not been paid into the state coffers till date. Indeed, the committee's report indicates that Muvimpina has not paid the corruption scandal we are talking about today. Money which would have gone into developmental projects, like I've said already, going into the pockets of a few selfish and greedy government officials. That should be a serious issue which should occupy our attention as a nation, and that is why we are raising this issue. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, not only was a transaction unlawful for breach of the Public Procurement Act and the NPA Act, but the proceeds from same have been pocketed by a few corrupt officials and criminal entities with the tacit approval of President AKUFO-ADDO. We are saying with his tacit approval because he has not made any effort, despite being the president and the appointer of the board of directors of BOS, the managing director and all that. He has not made any effort to recover these state resources for the state. President AKUFO-ADDO's handling of the Bosgate corruption scandal smacks of grand collusion and cover-up of epic proportions. The fact that till date, no one is standing prosecution for this pungent corruption scandal, which has caused a huge financial loss to the state, bears President AKUFO-ADDO out as the biggest enabler and promoter of corruption in the history of Ghana. Ironically, this is the man who rode on the back of an anti-corruption campaign into office, promising not to tolerate or countenance same under his administration. However, after being elected into office, he has normalized corruption in his government and has made it very attractive. He has defended and cleared his corrupt appointees of several grievous corruption scandals against the state, like the Bosgate scandal we are talking about this morning. It is for this reason that he has earned the accolade, the chief corruption clearing agent. Like similar other stinking corruption scandals that Ghanaians have witnessed under this regime, the corruption clearing agent, President AKUFO-ADDO, has been under the delusion that by coming out to give flowery speeches about corruption, he will succeed in exonerating and whitewashing his government from the corruption tag that inextricably hangs on his neck like a medal. But that has failed, as Ghanaians have now seen him for who he really is. Now, because this scandal is about BOS, let me tell you something about our record relative to the management of BOS, what we did, and how the unprecedented levels of corruption we are witnessing under this government is eroding all the gains we made under the Mahama regime. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is worthy of note that under the leadership of the visionary John Dramani Mahama, BOS was so efficiently managed such that for the first time in the history of Ghana, BOS was able to trade with international oil giants like British Petroleum, Vitol, Trafigura, just to mention a few, on an open credit supply system, a situation that helped to drive local fuel prices down in the year 2015 and 2016, even when world market prices dictated upward adjustments in fuel prices. The ex-well NDC Mahama government restructured BOST operations from 0 imports in 2013 to running a minimum of 5 of the 6 fully functional and profitable petroleum terminals across the country. We established a petroleum trading department in the company within 24 months and traded petroleum products of mainly gas, gasoline, gas oil, LPG, crude oil in the West African market to the tune of about $1.5 billion. At the time we were exiting office in 2017, the Mahama administration bequeathed to the AKUFO-ADDO government 200,000 metric tons of refined products valued at about 1 billion Ghana cedis. Not just that, we also left them 2 million barrels of crude, 1 million from the 10 fields, our own indigenous oil field in Ghana, and 1 million barrels of KWAKYE crude from Nigeria, valued at about $100 million. That is how sound the finances and the state of BOST was at the time we were leaving office. So well, distinguished friends from the media, did the NDC Mahama administration improve the finances of BOST through prudent management, that after reducing the BOST margin from 10 pesos to 3 pesos in the year 2015, we indicated in our 2016 supplementary budget that we were going to totally scrap the 3 pesos BOST margin on the prices of petroleum products to reduce the cost of fuel and provide some respite to Ghanaian petroleum consumers. And let me make the point that one of the men who were very instrumental in the transformation of BOST is sitting right behind me, our communications director, Mr. Kakra Esemwa, who was the board chair at BOST and worked closely with the then MD Wadakon to make this possible. But ladies and gentlemen of the press, it is sad to note today that as a result of the TV and plundering of the resources of BOST in the last 3.5 years, the once profitable and buoyant state asset, which was a partner to several reputable multinational oil companies under the ex-World Mahama regime, has been completely run down by the AKUFO-ADDO government, such that today, BOST has no strategic stocks of its own and is actually borrowing to pay its workers. So should there be any emergency in this country, BOST cannot fall on any strategic stocks of their own, save a few liters of fuel they have from some BDCs in this country today. That is the tragedy we have on our hands. Even more bizarre and painful is the fact that after running down BOST through corruption and thievery, President AKUFO-ADDO, who preached against the imposition of taxes on petroleum products while in opposition and promised to move this country from taxation to production, has recently increased the BOST margin the Mahama administration had promised to scrap by 100%. That is from 3 pesos to 6 pesos, thereby increasing the price of fuel by about 8%, ostensibly to raise funds for the very company, BOST, which he has collapsed through corruption. This latest action by President AKUFO-ADDO at the time, the nation is grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic with its attendant economic effects, is a monumental betrayal of the trust of Ghanaians and smacks of insensitivity of the highest order. President AKUFO-ADDO's decision to punish the already burdened Ghanaian with more taxes for his corrupt acts and that of his errant appointees that have brought BOST to his knees is most insensitive and unacceptable. And so in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen of the press, there is no gainsaying the fact that President AKUFO-ADDO's much touted fight against corruption has failed. He has flattered to deceive on his promise to fight corruption and protect the public purse. The endemic levels of corruption in his government has caused the country huge financial losses for which he must be held liable. And this Bossgate corruption scandal is a typical example. It is now clear beyond daylight that the much-touted fight against corruption was a ruse from day one, for which reason President AKUFO-ADDO should be kicked out of office come 7 December 2020. The NDC is deeply worried that state resources, such as the proceeds of the sale of the 5 million liters of contaminated fuel, which could have gone into the provision of schools, roads, hospitals, and other social amenities to ameliorate the plight of Ghanaians, have been pocketed by a few corrupt officials of the AKUFO-ADDO government. Little wonder that this government has been likened by many as an organized criminal syndicate of thieves. And before I conclude, anytime you talk about corruption this way, people ask you, so what are your alternatives? What would you have done differently if you were in office? Ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you that under the next NDC Mahama government, we will do better. We will do definitely. First of all, as a country, we need to ensure that we reduce, if not eliminate, the incidence of contamination of fuel at BOS and other state-owned agencies. Number two, we need to ensure that in disposing or in selling these products, we follow the Public Procurement Act. We go through competitive tendering. We ensure that there is value for money in the interest of the state. And when they are sold, we must ensure that monies are paid into the state coffers. Today you look around, look at all the problems this country is bedeviled with, simply because we are being told by government that we don't have enough. And so if we sell critical state assets like this, and we allow a few people to pocket the money, and the media, which is the fourth estate of the realm, is quiet, civil society organizations are quiet, because we've been overwhelmed by the sheer number of corruption scandals we have witnessed under these people, then that is a problem. And that is why we are raising this issue. It is our hope that you will help us pursue it to its logical conclusion. But ladies and gentlemen of the press, the day of accountability for corrupt officials of the AKUFO-ADDO government is not far. Ask the next NDC Mahama administration, inshallah, in 2021, shall investigate and prosecute all culprits who are involved in this stinking corruption scandal. Notice is hereby served to all those who continue to plunder the assets of state-owned entities like BOS, that the day of reckoning, the day of accountability, cometh sooner than later. Thank you very much for your attention. So, ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, we'll move to our second topic, which is a very important issue. President AKUFO-ADDO last week, Friday, at the commissioning of the TEMA Runabout Interchange project, made some disparaging remarks about the infrastructure legacy of His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. We, as a responsible opposition, are determined this time around that we will not allow the MPP, President AKUFO-ADDO, Dr. Bawumia, to get away with the lies they got away with in the run-up to the 2016 elections. That is what our flag bearer meant by boot for boot. And so today, we are going to respond to President AKUFO-ADDO in very emphatic terms. And who best to do this than the man who was the Deputy Minister for Communications in the Mahama administration? He's our parliamentary candidate for the Asebu Kwaman, Asebu Abura Kwaman Kese. Abura Asebu Kwaman Kese, forgive me. The Abura Sebu Kwaman Kese constituency in the central region. And God willingly, he will be the next member of parliament for the NDC at that constituency. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I introduce to you my brother, Comrade FELIX OFOSU. Thank you very much. He will be with you after the podium is sanitized.
Yo
gentlemen of the media, thank you once again for your kind coverage of this very important platform. Last Friday, President AKUFO-ADDO, at the commissioning ceremony of the TEMA interchange, stated as follows: "We made a pledge to the Ghanaian people to expand and improve the road network while closing the missing link in the network," unquote. He also asserted, and I quote, "We had to make this pledge because we know that the so-called unprecedented infrastructure development of the Mahama administration was fantasy, existing in the Green Book and not on the ground," end of quote. It bears mentioning, ladies and gentlemen, that it will not be the first time that President AKUFO-ADDO has made such comments about the contents of the Green Book or the stellar record of his immediate predecessor, President John Dramani Mahama. On 7th May 2019, he had this to say to the members of the Upper West Regional House of Chiefs who had paid him a visit at the Flagstaff House. "Before I came here, I was told by my biggest competitor that they had done all the roads in Ghana and that they are responsible for an unprecedented infrastructure development. Everywhere I go, I do not think there is any institution that had not talked to me or has not raised the issue about roads in their area as their principal concern," end of quote. President AKUFO-ADDO took this narrative a notch higher when he stated in his fourth and hopefully final State of the Nation address on 20th February 2020 that, and I quote, "Artist impressions had been passed off as constructed roads." Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the President's misrepresentations of the Green Book predate his ascension to the highest office of the land. He had claimed during the launch of the NPP manifesto in 2016, and that manifesto, which has, in the fullness of time, proven to be the most deceptive and dishonored in Ghanaian political history, that the Green Book was full of artist impressions. In summary, therefore, the President, through various statements, has sought to portray three things. One, that the contents of the Green Book are not real and cannot be found on the ground or anywhere in the country. Two, that the book is filled with artist impressions. Three, that his predecessor, President John Dramani Mahama, has said that he did all roads in Ghana, but no evidence of this exists anywhere. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the facts as they relate to each of the President's claims are as follows. The Green Book, officially titled Accounting to the People, is arguably the most famous book that chronicles the achievements of the Ghanaian government. Its contents have been widely publicized and are very well known to the generality of the Ghanaian people. Many will therefore be surprised at the effort put in by President AKUFO-ADDO to convince himself otherwise. Having actively participated in the compilation of the book, which highlights the boldest and biggest capital investment in the history of Ghana, in the history of the Fourth Republic, I beg your pardon, I can state with absolute certainty that the President's claim that it contains fantasy projects that cannot be found on the ground is an outright untruth. I must at this stage point out that the team that put the book together has such membership as former presidential advisor, Dr. Valerie Sawyer, former Deputy Chief of Staff, Johnny Osei-Kofi, and former presidential staffers, James Ajeni Mboating and Dr. Pesa White. Indeed, Mr. Francis Nsia gracefully designed the book. So what you see as a final product is actually the handiwork of Mr. Francis Nsia, a brilliant graphic designer. In view, well, I understand Mr. Nsia is here, so perhaps he could acknowledge the commendation. In view of the abundance of evidence over the accuracy of the contents of the Green Book, there are only two possible explanations for the consistent falsehood of the President on the matter. It is possible that despite having heard about it, President AKUFO-ADDO has never cited a copy of the book and has thus not had the opportunity to peruse it, in which case he would have been compelled to rely on the same pedestrian propaganda of low-level MPP communicators. This would not be a far-fetched theory, in view of the several times he has displayed a total lack of attention to detail and faced embarrassment when multiple plagiarized speeches have been thrust before him to read. We all recollect how the same cavalier approach to governance and his lack of attention to detail led to his approval of the most inflated contract in the history of Ghana, the Ameri Innovation Deal, only for it to be withdrawn and for us to be told by sources with knowledge of the matter that he had been misled into granting executive approval for same. It is also entirely possible that he is fully apprised of the contents of the Green Book, but has chosen the path of falsehood, insofar as it enables him mislead fanatical supporters of the MPP or unsuspecting members of the Ghanaian public, and in the process hide his dubious reputation as the least performing of all Ghanaian leaders, at least in the area of infrastructure and capital investments. Either way, this would be most unbecoming of an occupant of the high office of president. That office is associated with certain basic requirements, which include candor, thoroughness, and truthfulness. The president of a country must speak in ways that leave no room for doubt or the potential for him to be ridiculed or derided. For the avoidance of doubt, there is not a single project in the Green Book which does not exist on the ground today or for which clear context has not been provided regarding its status. Anybody interested in the truth would simply match what is in the Green Book to what exists on the ground. Such an exercise, ladies and gentlemen, will yield only one outcome, which is that the work shown in the book are as real as they come, and evidence of them are abundant. How can President AKUFO-ADDO, for instance, look the people of Ghana in the eye and say that the Rage Hospital does not exist, when everybody knows it does, and that on the 4th of March, 2020, he toured it to ostensibly ascertain the state of preparedness of that magnificent edifice towards the fight against COVID-19? Surely, the president would not have Ghanaians believe that what he saw on his visit to the hospital was fantasy, or that he was walking on the pages of the Green Book when he undertook that tour. Or is the president telling the people of Ghana that when on the same 4th of March 2020, he toured the ultramodern Terminal 3 at the Kotoka International Airport to learn about their COVID-19 preparedness, he was inspecting the Phantom facility? If he were ever in any doubt about the existence of that terminal, he would certainly be aware that one of his daughters operates a prime duty-free shop at that facility. Again, can President AKUFO-ADDO describe the University of Ghana Medical Center, built at a cost of $217 million by his predecessor, and which his own government has earmarked as the treatment center for foreign diplomats who contract COVID-19, as fantasy or unreal? It does the image of the president and the office he occupies no good that he continues to live in denial of what his own eyes, I beg your pardon, have seen, and what every Ghanaian can testify to. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, on the second claim that the Green Book is filled with artist impressions, it represents yet another exercise in denial by the president. The Green Book, a copy of which I have here, is a 210-page publication containing a total of 584 pictures. These pictures represent actual projects which had either been completed at the time of compiling the book, or for those that had not been completed, progress made on them. There are exactly 5 artist impressions which depicted what those projects on which work was being done at the time of the publication, but had not reached a stage of completion that could be shown, would look like when completed. These are clearly captioned as such in the book, and include the $298 million Kejetia market in Kumasi, which, by the way, represents the single largest capital investment in the history of the Ashanti region. Terminal 3 at the Kotoka International Airport, and the whole airport, among others. To be very clear, ladies and gentlemen, these projects have been completed as I speak, and their existence cannot be denied. It is therefore a gratuitous falsehood for President AKUFO-ADDO and his MPP to say that the Green Book is filled with artist impressions. All of these are imposing physical structures that no one can miss. The president's assertion that President Mahama had stated that he constructed all roads in Ghana during his tenure, and that those roads cannot be found, is yet another falsehood, that must not come from the occupant of the highest office of the land. I wish to put it beyond doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that President Mahama has never made such a claim anywhere or at any time. We would like to throw a direct challenge to the president to show where and when his predecessor said this or forever hold his peace. It is obvious that President AKUFO-ADDO invented this falsehood in a bid to mask his abysmal performance in road construction, as is the case in every other sector of national life. Between pages 100 and 113, the Green Book lists over 200 roads that had either been completed, were ongoing at the time, or which had been awarded on contract. Here too, I wish to state for emphasis that there is not a single road which was said to have been done in the Green Book that does not exist. No amount of consistent untruth about this from the president can change this fact. Perhaps the clearest indication yet of the total falsehoods inherent in the president's claims has often come from Nana Akufo-Addo himself. He has never ceased telling the people of Ghana that his wobbly government has paid road contractors as much as 2 billion Ghana cedis in arrears owed them by the previous NDC government. Unless President Akufo-Addo is publicly admitting to paying contractors for no work done, it is extremely illogical and totally disrespectful to the people of Ghana for the same person to say that no road projects have been done by President Mahama or that the roads exist only in the Green Book.
On the screen.
And the president's statement is on the screen. This is gleaned from the site of the presidency of the Republic of Ghana. Here, he states that he is paying road contractors, in fact, clearing President Mahama's debts. So I wish to ask, if President Mahama had not constructed roads and the roads exist only in the Green Book, why is President Akufo-Addo paying contractors? It is perfectly legitimate for Ghanaians to demand that their roads be fixed, especially in areas where work on roads started by his predecessor have stalled because of vindictive but totally unjustified investigations carried out by his government, which yielded no results. A case in point is the Cocoa Road projects, which he caused to be stopped because he claimed an investigation was being conducted in it. We are aware that the investigation cost $10 million and yet did not turn out a single piece of evidence to suggest that there was any wrongdoing of any sort in the award of those contracts. $10 million can construct a good number of roads in various parts of this country. President Akufo-Addo chose to waste it on frivolous investigations that yielded nothing. So when he goes to functions and the chiefs and people of Ghana demand that their roads be fixed, it is a legitimate call that he must respond to by actually doing the roads and not peddling on truth about his predecessor. As far as roads are concerned, ladies and gentlemen, and seeing as the president's latest false claims about the Green Book were made at the commissioning of the TEMA Motorway Interchange project, which he has sought to appropriate in terms of its conception, it is necessary at this stage to put to rest what we consider to be a needless debate about whose brainchild it was or who did the heavy lifting required to ensure its execution. The minority caucus in Parliament last week set the record straight, but just so that anyone out there who is not yet aware of the facts surrounding the project is left in no doubt, I wish to reiterate this, also in the hope that it jolts President Akufo-Addo and his government into reality about the true state of affairs. The TEMA Motorway Interchange project was funded by a Japanese grant of $57 million applied for in 2013 by the Mahama administration. The survey for the development of the project and the tender process began at the behest of the Japanese government through the Japanese International Cooperation Agency in March 2015. The survey and design were completed in December 2016, and a detailed report presented in February 2017, when the Akufo-Addo government was barely a month old. The only contribution of the Akufo-Addo government was to go through the mere formality of signing the grant agreement with JICA after work had already been done prior to the assumption of power. The rest, of course, was to go through the motions and respect the agreements so signed. It is beyond debate, therefore, that for all intents and purposes, the TEMA motorway interchange is the brainchild and handiwork of President John Dramani Mahama. It is regrettable that when commissioning the TEMA motorway interchange, the zero-sum game brand of politics practiced by President AKUFO-ADDO, which emphasizes polarization instead of cohesion, caused him to depart from the noble tradition set by the venerable President John Evans Atta Mills of blessed memory, and followed through by President John Dramani Mahama, which saw them invite President John Agyekum Kufuor to the commissioning of the N1 project and the Bui Dam, which he found money for. While in office, President Mahama demonstrated his capacity to execute such major road projects by starting and completing both the Kwame Nkrumah interchange and the Kaswa interchange projects, respectively. He gave life to his vision to further modernize the road network across the country by securing funding for a number of major interchange projects. In November 2016, President Mahama secured $32.9 million and $84 million for the Obechembi-Lamte and Pokwasi interchanges, respectively. If you happen to pass by the former Obechembi-Lamte circle or the Pokwasi road and find interchanges coming up, please note that those projects have been made possible because President John Dramani Mahama found money for them, and they are his initiative. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we also know that all the efforts President AKUFO-ADDO has put into disparaging the achievements of President Mahama are but a defense mechanism against the exposure of his abject failure to match up to his predecessor sector by sector. President AKUFO-ADDO has benefited from more resources than any other leader before him. At the last reckoning, he had access to close to 250 billion Ghana cedis in 3.5 years, compared to roughly the same amount available to the NDC between 2009 and 2017, which is a period of 8 years. President Mahama, within the 4 years of his stewardship, had access to barely half of this amount, yet produced the most outstanding outcomes of any leader in the Fourth Republic. The danger that the Green Book poses to President AKUFO-ADDO is a grave one, as it provides the most compelling and visceral proof of his mediocre performance compared to his predecessor. Hence, the extraordinary lengths he has gone in a fruitless bid to discredit its contents. Time would not permit a full analysis of everything contained in the Green Book, but I would be remiss if I failed to highlight the performance of President John Dramani Mahama in 2 or 3 sectors in order to offer perspective on just how abysmal his successor, President AKUFO-ADDO, has been. As the foreword of the Green Book, penned by then Communications Minister, Dr. Edward Omanibuama, makes clear, the projects and programs captured in there were by no means exhaustive, as there would not have been enough space to do so, given the sheer scale of the work carried out by President Mahama while in office. There are therefore many projects that came on stream after the book was published, like the Bank Hospital and over 22 polyclinics. A lot has already been said, ladies and gentlemen, about the unprecedented investments President Mahama made in the health sector, which investments have become the mainstay of the current fight against COVID-19. I would like to focus, therefore, on other sectors, such as education, water, transport, and energy, to demonstrate the gulf in performance between John Dramani Mahama and Nana Akufo-Addo. After coming under heavy criticism for having little to show in the education sector by way of infrastructure, which has led to the obnoxious double-track system at SHS level, the Akufo-Addo government has begun passing off some classroom blocks as notable achievements. The Minister of Education only last week claimed that his government has constructed 321 classrooms. Please note, classrooms, not classroom blocks. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, this claim is most misleading, I beg your pardon. The truth is that President Akufo-Addo has only 196 classroom block projects to his name since 2017, after having access to over 250 billion Ghana cedis, which is far more than any of his predecessors received. Many projects that are ongoing at the SHS level were inherited from the NDC government. To be exact, a total of 766 classroom block projects were bequeathed to this government by the Mahama administration. And this is a fact contained in the documents presented to Parliament for the collateralization of GET Fund for a loan of $1.5 billion to complete them. In fact, both the Minister of Education, Matthew Opoku Prempeh, and his deputy, Dr. Yao Educhum, are on record and are widely quoted in the media as having said this openly. And if you pan to my left, you find that on the screen. We display the exact quotations of the Education Minister and his deputy regarding how they were going to Parliament to look for money to complete 766 classroom and other projects that were initiated by President Mahama. The NDC's record in terms of education infrastructure far outweighs anything the MPP can lay claim to. And I present a summary of them below. Now, under the NDC government, we constructed 1,347 classroom blocks, not classrooms, at the KG level. Indeed, between 2010 and 2016, we undertook a total of 5,128 different projects at basic school level, comprising of the following: 3,322 classroom blocks, not classrooms, at primary and JHS level, 73 teacher accommodation facilities, 1,161 washrooms, and 82 water systems in schools across the country. At the SHS level, we started over 1,000 classroom blocks and other projects. 123 community day senior high school projects were started, out of which 80 had gotten off the ground and reached appreciable stages of completion. 42 of them had been commissioned and had in fact admitted students as of the end of 2016. And here, let me say that one of the most bizarre arguments made by the MPP, right from the president to the least person in the MPP, is that 25 of the community day schools were financed by the World Bank, and so they cannot be counted as part of President Mahama's achievements. It is the most ridiculous argument I have ever heard. In other words, because the World Bank gave President AKUFO-ADDO $100 million to pay for some of the interventions during this COVID-19 period, he cannot be said to be the one who did it. It is a most bizarre argument which must be dismissed with alacrity. At the tertiary level, the NDC established 3 new public universities, namely the University of Health and Allied Sciences, the University of Energy and Natural Resources, and the University of Environment and Sustainable Development. A new campus was built for UHAS at Sokode in the Volta region near Ho, while President Mahama found an amount of $50 million for the construction of the Somenya campus of the University of Environment and Sustainable Development. He actually cut short for it on 29 December 2016, and indeed, this is what it looks like at this moment. So when you pass by Somenya and find this beautiful campus of the University of Environment and Sustainable Development, please note that it is the direct result of President Mahama's work. The only notable contribution of President AKUFO-ADDO to tertiary education is the unnecessary renaming of existing institutions after MPP figures. And indeed, we all know that 2 years ago, but for public outcry, President AKUFO-ADDO was threatening to name the University of Ghana after his grand-uncle, J.B. Dankwa. This is a matter of public record. He claimed that his grand-uncle, J.B. Dankwa, was the founder of the University of Ghana, when we know that it was a colonial administration in 1948 that founded that university. The other notable achievement of President AKUFO-ADDO in tertiary education is the introduction of the draconian Public University Bill, which seeks to undermine academic freedoms and make the various universities appendages of the new patriotic party. In the area of water provision, for instance, President Mills, when he took over power in 2009, met water coverage, that is the percentage of Ghanaians who had access to potable water in 2009 at 58.5%. President Kufuor had met it in 2001 at 54% and improved it by 4 percentage points. President Mills took this to 63% by 2012. President Mahama, who had barely half of what President AKUFO-ADDO has had in the last 3.5 years, took this or increased it by 13% to 76% as of 2016. In absolute terms, what this means is that the NDC increased water supply capacity by 109.7 million gallons per day to serve an additional 7 million Ghanaians in over 2,000 communities across the country. President AKUFO-ADDO, despite all the 250 billion Ghana cedis he has shrunk this to 69% as we speak, with virtually no significant water project to boast about. And these figures are verifiable from the website of the Sanitation and Water Ministry. In the electricity sector, I beg your pardon, President Mahama ramped up generation capacity by an additional 2,000 megawatts and increased electricity coverage from 54% in 2009 to 84% by 2016 by extending electricity to 2,900 communities. Despite having 250 billion Ghana cedis since taking office, President AKUFO-ADDO has added approximately 0 megawatts generation capacity and has only increased electricity coverage by a paltry 2%. So compare 30% increase under the NDC to just 2% under President AKUFO-ADDO. In the transport sector, where we now have 3 ministries instead of 1, which existed under President Mahama made telling contributions which as yet remain unparalleled. In the aviation subsector, for instance, President Mahama did the following. The 5 million passenger a year Terminal 3 at the Kotoka International Airport. And it is going to be displayed shortly on the screen for you. The modernization of Terminal 2 at the Kotoka International Airport. President Mahama did the whole airport. And for the avoidance of doubt, the whole airport exists. There are those who go about claiming that it is an artist's impression in the Green Book. It is an actual airport that exists. President Mahama also did phase 1 of the Kumasi International Airport, which made it possible for flights to take off and land at night because of the provision of aeronautical gadgets. He also found $72 million for phase 2 of the the Kumasi International Airport. And if you see a modern terminal building coming up at the Kumasi Airport today, please note once again that it stems directly from the handiwork of President Mahama. President Mahama also did phase 1 of the Tamale International Airport, which has made it possible for Hajj pilgrims to fly directly from Tamale to Mecca or Jeddah to perform the important pilgrimage. President Mahama also modernized the Wa airstrip. Now, despite all the resources he has received, President AKUFO-ADDO has nothing to show in the aviation sector beyond the creation of a new ministry. He is yet to lay even 1 meter of runway anywhere in this country in the aviation sector. In the maritime subsector, President Mahama counts amongst his achievements the massive MPS terminal, which has doubled the capacity of the port and transformed it into a world-class facility, which is displayed on the screen to my left. And it is second only in size to the Lagos port in the whole of West Africa. The completion of the first phase of the KWAKYE port expansion project is yet another achievement of President Mahama in the maritime subsector. And that cost 300 million euros to do. He also found another 300 million euros for the execution of the second phase. Another achievement in that sector is the expansion of the Albert Bosomtwe-Sam fishing harbor. And for those of you who do not remember Albert Bosomtwe-Sam, he was one of our most vibrant MPs who held the fort for us in Parliament, but he passed away a number of years ago. President Mahama expanded the port and deservedly named it after him. Now, beyond the baseless fault finding and the needless delay in the execution of the second phase of the KWAKYE port expansion project, President AKUFO-ADDO has virtually nothing to show once again in the maritime subsector. In the railway subsector, President Mahama left even more indelible footprints. He counts amongst his successes the 20-kilometer KWAKYE Secondary Kojo Krom Rail project, which has 3 modern terminals along the route. In November of 2016, President Mahama secured and had Parliament approve $398 million from the Indian Exim Bank for the execution of the 84-kilometer TEMA to AKUFO-ADDO rail project. I need to stress, ladies and gentlemen, that if you happen to find rail tracks popping up between TEMA and AKUFO-ADDO with terminals, it is down to the work of President Mahama. President AKUFO-ADDO knows next to nothing about it. Here too, beyond the creation of the completely needless Ministry of Railways, there is little in terms of achievement that President AKUFO-ADDO has, which could be compared in any way, shape, or form to what President Mahama delivered. Lip service has continued to be paid to President AKUFO-ADDO's promise to build a rail line between Ghana and Burkina Faso. And with 6 months to the expiration of his tenure, no tangible work has been done in that direction. In the communication sector, where I happen to have served, President Mahama achieved such remarkable feats as constructing the largest data center in West Africa. He also laid a 510 kilometer long fiber optic cable, which has opened up the eastern corridor of this country to data services, and had the multipurpose Accra Digital Center established as a hub for tech companies and business process outsourcing firms. President Mahama also ensured the execution of the imposing headquarters of the National Communications Authority and over 70 enhanced community information centers, which are helping bridge the digital divide between urban and rural communities in Ghana. I might add, for emphasis, that the National Emergency Number 112, announced earlier this year by President AKUFO-ADDO with pomp and circumstance, was in fact launched in 2015 by the Mahama administration. I happen to know because as Deputy Communications Minister, I chaired the Entity Tender Committee of GIFIC, the Ghana Investment Fund for Electronic Communication. And so I presided over the review of the tender processes for the award of that contract to establish that call center. And there's one in Kumasi and another one in Accra. That was when the 112 emergency number was launched. Yet President AKUFO-ADDO announced it with such glee when he commissioned some ambulances, as though it is an invention that he brought about. The paucity of investments in infrastructure by President AKUFO-ADDO across board is amply reflected in key economic indicators presented in his own government's budget statements. Now, one of the best ways of assessing the government's commitment and actual investment in infrastructure is what we call the capital expenditure, or CAPEX, to GDP ratio, which essentially measures how much money is put into infrastructure against the GDP of a country. The higher it is, the more investment has been made. Now, a comparison of the CAPEX to GDP ratios under President Mahama and President AKUFO-ADDO is presented in the table below. Now, in 2013, the CAPEX to GDP ratio of President Mahama was 3.9%. In 2014, it was 3.9%. In 2015, it increased to 4%. And in 2016, it increased to 4.6%. In 2017, under President AKUFO-ADDO, it plummeted to 3.1%. In 2018, it took a further nosedive and came to 1.6%. In 2019, it was 1.5%. The figures for 2020 are yet to be computed because we are halfway through the year. And given the trajectory, there's every indication that it will plummet further. Now, these can be gleaned from the budget statements of 2013 to 2019. This table shows clearly that the best President AKUFO-ADDO has to offer is still far less than President Mahama's worst performance, and should clear any doubt as to who operates within the realms of fantasy and who gets the job done. And indeed, speaking about fantasies, President AKUFO-ADDO has appointed a director for the Cater Port, which does not exist. It should be very clear who operates in the realms of fantasy. The 2020 elections will be first and foremost a referendum on the stewardship of President AKUFO-ADDO. And we in the NDC stand prepared to lead the scrutiny of his performance, or rather the lack of it, on the basis of facts and figures. There will be no room for untruth of the sort peddled by the president about the Green Book and the record of President Mahama. We in the NDC stand ready, willing, and able to quickly dispel such falsehoods with superior facts and incontrovertible evidence. As elections are also about the future, President Mahama has already given clear indication about some policy proposals that he will put on the table for the consideration of the Ghanaian people. He will, in the coming days, make public major policies to be rolled out when, God willing, he returns to the leadership of this country to salvage it from the path of certain ruin that the maladministration of President AKUFO-ADDO has set it on. Based on the facts put out in this briefing, I would urge the Ghanaian public to totally disregard the false claims about the Green Book and the achievements of President Mahama. I also invite the media to increase their scrutiny and fact-checking of claims made by politicians, especially in the run-up to the December elections, so that unsuspecting members of the public are not deliberately misled, like the president did last Friday, and also to ensure that the confidence and trust the Ghanaian people repose in public figures is not abused for narrow sectarian and partisan gain. Whereas a president's words should be authoritative and carry such weight as to settle controversies, President AKUFO-ADDO has for some time now favored falsehoods and misrepresentations as a political tool. So instead of trusting his word as president and verifying later, which should be the case, it has become imperative now to distrust whatever he says until it has been verified. I thank you for your attention, members of the media, and the floor is open for questions.
Detailed and insightful presentation, which has exposed the dishonesty of President AKUFO-ADDO. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we shall open the floor now for questions on any of the issues we have spoken about today. But we need to, Kluche, before I come to you, we need to settle this issue about the projects contained in the Green Book once and for all. Like my colleague said, you, the media, are the fourth estate of the realm, and you have a duty to help the people of this country appreciate facts from lies. And so to settle this issue once and for all, the Communication Bureau of the NDC is doing something, and we want it to be captured on record. We are giving all pressmen here copies of the Green Book of President Mahama. This is the Green Book of President Mahama, and we are proud of this superior and unprecedented record. We have copies here. Lawyer, I want you to distribute copies of this Green Book to all pressmen here, so that if you have any question about any project contained in this document, you can ask and, for your question to be answered. At this stage, the floor is opened. Because we want to capture your questions and because we have just one microphone, I will plead with you that you come close to the podium and ask your question. We shall take 3 questions, answer that before we close. Thank you. So hold it with this issue. Distribute the books.
Kamala is my name. I work for TV3. Now, this is to Felix. You said that your administration did start the phase 1 of the Kumasi International Airport. Let me just read a quote from the former executive director of the Dankwa Institute, that's Gabi Asaro-Chidako, who on May 25 said the construction of the Kumasi International Airport is on course, despite some delays with procurement due to COVID-19. Soon, you will be able to check in or out your luggage in Kumasi. you will be able to check in or out your luggage in Kumasi, flying in or to Europe, US, or elsewhere. Now, he goes on to say that over 500,000 passengers a year are expected to use this airport from 2021. This is the question. You said you did an international airport. How many passengers within the period? You said that there were direct flights from Kumasi to other parts of the world, especially at night. How many passengers do you have on record to have used the airport he said you did as an international one, compared to what he is saying that will happen in 2021?
Any other question? Could you come to the mic?
Good morning. My name is Kojo Ajman. I work with CTFM. I just want to find out that Felix detailed a lot of the projects that are in the Green Book. But beyond the Green Book, the NDC had 4 years of projecting these facilities to Ghanaians. What did they do beyond the Green Book to let Ghanaians know that, yes, indeed, we did this project? My second question goes to Sami Gyamfi. I've seen news report on President Mahama saying that when he gets the nod again, he's going to make sure that teacher training allowances and nurses allowances will be paid. Is it a sign of weakness or backtracking? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Margaret Sabwache with the Vanguard newspaper. Mr. Sami Gyamfi, in your delivery, you kept saying the media and stakeholders are not talking about the corruption cases in the AKUFO-ADDO-led government because they are overwhelming. Is it a compliment or an accusation?
Is it a compliment or an accusation?
Please, who else?
No, you can take this one.
Thank you very much. My name is George Olsen from Pan-African Television. Okay, Honorable, quick one. Aside giving us the booklet, I don't think it's enough. We have to do fact checking. Is the NDC ready to partner with media houses that are ready to help in checking facts concerning this booklet? Thank you very much.
All right, so okay, thank you very much. I have 2 questions, but I will allow Honorable FELIX OFOSU to deal with the questions about his presentation in the Green Book. And then, before I conclude, I'll answer the 2 questions you asked, Kojo and my sister. Thank you.
All right, yeah, Kwamila asked the question about the international status of the Kumasi International Airport as of when the NDC was in power, and quoted Gabi Asariotredako's post. To begin with, we had always made it clear that the Kumasi International Airport project was a multi-phased project. The first phase involved the extension of the runway to make it possible for longer haul aircrafts to land, and the provision of aeronautical facilities and gadgets like lighting and other navigation equipment to make it possible for international flights to land there. The second phase involved the construction of a terminal building, a bigger terminal building, to facilitate processing of passengers and the provision of auxiliary, or if like ancillary facilities. Now, when the Kumasi Airport Phase 1 project was completed, it is a matter of public record that President Mahama flew in a flight from Europe and landed at that airport. Indeed, he was due in Kumasi for a visit, and he landed there that evening. We do know that the Asante has also landed there from Europe direct. There have been several African leaders from Kenya and elsewhere who have also landed there at that airport because of its international status, because of the facilities provided. Now, as I indicated, in October of 2016, President Mahama secured $72 million for the execution of the second phase of that project. In fact, on 5th December 2016, he actually cut the short for work to begin on phase 2. So there is no dispute about the international status of that airport as of the time President Mahama was leaving. What has not happened is that commercial flights have not left that airport for abroad or landed from abroad at that airport. But there is evidence of an incontrovertible nature that the Ghanaian president at the time, President Mahama, landed from Europe at that particular airport when he was doing Kumasi for some business. So there's no dispute about it. Again, when you see that terminal building coming up, it is the direct handiwork of President Mahama. And there's no dispute about it. We do know that President AKUFO-ADDO went to recut the sword in the most bizarre fashion after President Mahama had already done it. So the matters must be put to rest. We do know that after the first phase of the project, the MPP, in usual fashion, sought to mock it and claim that it was not an international airport. Little did they know that it was a multi-phased project. And President Mahama had already done work on Terminal 3 and shown more than enough capacity to do these sort of things. He had built a brand new airport at Ho, extended or improved or enhanced the facilities at the Wa airstrip. So there is no debate at all about his capacity to deliver, and the evidence is there for everybody to see. Now, on Kojo Ajiman's question about what we did to propagate the book, that is one of the regrets that we must express with the way that the media handles some of these things.
Not to propagate the book, to tell Ghanaians what you have done. The project
well, indeed, the book was launched by President Mahama himself at a live event at the State House. President Mahama, for the first time in the history of Ghana, stood before the people of Ghana and took them through page by page the contents of the Green Book. Beyond that, there was not a single day that we had opportunity as government that we did not highlight these things. At either the short-cutting or commissioning of all these projects, the media was in tow. Indeed, if you do a simple Google search, I'm sure that stations like City FM, City TV, City FM Online, and all the other major networks in Ghana have digital footprints of coverage of this particular activity. Again, I was at the Ministry of Communications. I do know that myself, my minister, and other key stakeholders in government embarked on various tours across this country to engage people directly on the contents of the Green Book. We called it accounting to the people. We were in Ho, we were in Sunyani, we were in Kumasi, we were in Tamale. Everywhere that we needed to go, we went. So there was no shortage of dissemination of information regarding the Green Book. That is why it is regrettable that despite the availability of that information, President AKUFO-ADDO can still peddle outright falsehood. And the media does not fact-check him because the fact is simply available. The media knows about these things. I'm surprised how the media, for instance, would merely channel a report that President AKUFO-ADDO says the contents of the Green Book are fantasy, when the media went on tour with him on 4th March 2020 to the Raid Hospital and the Kotoka Terminal 3. How is it possible for such a thing to happen when the media itself covered it? So you do know, as a matter of fact, that the president could not have been telling the truth. He didn't even require this program to be in a position to tell that the president was peddling on truth. So we have made every effort to disseminate information. We do appreciate that it is a never-ending activity. And so we will continue to do so. And that is why this platform is there. If there is ever any doubt about any of the things we did, we will do our best to put it out there. So we did not relent in our efforts to propagate. Indeed, the Green Book is also available online. We created an entire website and uploaded it there so that those who do not have access to the physical copies, because there was only a limited number of copies that you could make, could go online and access information about it. So the facts are clear, they are not disputable. It is just the case that the president has no respect for the people he governs. And so he looks them in the eye and peddles blatant untruth, which is most unbecoming of somebody occupying the office that he occupies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please, do you all have copies of the Green Book? So we will be most grateful if you can capture it in your reports, your publications, your story, that at this press conference, you were given hard copies of the NDC's Green Book. We have done so because we know that the content of this book is factual, verifiable, and the truth. And so let it be on record. To the sister of ours who, I didn't get her name, who asked whether, yes, I made a statement that the media is not, talking enough about the numerous corruption scandals we have witnessed under the AKUFO-ADDO government. You wanted to find out whether that was an accusation or a compliment. Neither of the two. It is not a compliment and it is not an accusation. It is to let you know that we concede and we do appreciate the difficulty you have on your hands because of the number of corruption scandals we have witnessed under this government. Even for us as an opposition party with a responsibility of keeping government on its toes to constructive critique, sometimes it becomes difficult for us to, follow all these scandals. And so we understand the difficulty you have, but we are only drawing attention to these key corruption scandals which stand out. This Bosgate corruption scandal is a serious matter that we all, especially you, the media, who are the fourth estate of the realm, must pursue, because 5 million liters of contaminated fuel, as I said, has been sold to unlicensed businesses in breach of the Public Procurement Law and the MPA Act. The committee, which was tasked to investigate the matter, are done with their work. They say that the transaction was criminal and that till date, not a dime from the proceeds of that transaction has been paid into the state coffers. We are only playing our role as a responsible opposition and drawing attention to this important matter so that we can, follow these scandals, if possible, retrieve the proceeds of this transaction and use the money for the construction of schools, boreholes, hospitals, and other developmental projects for the Ghanaian people. Finally, there was a question about, quite unrelated to what has been discussed here, but because this is a press briefing event, I will touch on it briefly. You wanted to find out whether President Mahama has promised to pay allowances to teacher trainees and nursing trainees. That is accurate. The flag bearer and leader of the NDC has indicated that if elected, he is not going to touch allowances to teacher trainees and nursing trainees. In fact, we are going to maintain that. But more importantly, he has indicated that he will be cancelling the 1-year mandatory national service, which has been foisted on teacher trainees. He has indicated that he will be restoring the automatic employment of all teacher trainees. No single teacher trainee will be denied posting under the presidency of John Dramani Mahama, like it is happening now. So there will be automatic employment of all teacher trainees. The 1-year mandatory national service, which is just a convenient excuse to delay the recruitment of teachers, will also be cancelled. And the obnoxious nuisance licensure examination will also be cancelled. Like FELIX just said, very soon the flag bearer and leader will be addressing the country on what his key alternative policies for this election are, and he will be commenting on some of these issues. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, we'll be departing from our tradition of always giving you summaries in the vernacular language. We'll close at this point, but I will be available here. Honorable FELIX will also be available here to address the account stations here in the account language. But because we didn't start early, we started 30 minutes after time, and we don't want to hold you here for too long, we will close at this stage. Thank you very much for coming. We are most grateful. We'll get you copies of our statement and the 2 scripts before you leave. Thank you. So the account stations should just stay back for just 5 minutes. We will do some quick summaries in the account language, just 5 minutes.
Serve you. Seriyo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Granachre, Omanu Seriyo, Omanu Seriyo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Granachre, Sassini, Eya Bodini Mayen, Mojanana Nanum Shebunyani to Mayen. Little mini so say a bay and Biaswasu, Interchasu, Kutu, Kaninia, Casabi, Omina, Eddie and Ramuta, Mayan, Sassu, Tatumse, Omanu Sabayo, Omanu Sariayo, Eya Ose, Oma for Granachre, Omanu Sabayo. Seriyo, Eya Seta Ose, Oma for Granachre, Sassini, Eya Bodini Mayen, Mojanana Nanum Shebunyani to Mayen. Little mini so say a bay and Biaswasu.
Corruption scandal. So Mobekaya on the 18th of January 2017, Omampenye AKUFO-ADDO betena akonwa so no. Obaye ne yete se fan wo a e yo man Ghana ejapade. Be se 5 million letters. Ye the diesel ne petrol akofra ama na sei. Aban no aton e de ama companies aye from moving pina and Zoop oil a. Omuni licenses be from MPA say sa fan wo dwuma no omoye bi.